Um, we are now being recorded. I think it's a good idea that we review where we're at as far as financial and try to make some plans on where we want to be at the end of the year. So I guess I'll start with Ms. Carlin. Would you like to just give us an overview of our finances?
Council President Platt, I believe we need a roll call.
We had a roll call beginning. We already had a roll call.
Okay.
Ms. Carlin? Bill?
Mr. Platt. Oh, I don't know if that's, I don't know if Janet, if she just came on.
Okay.
And I don't know if Kathy Walls, I don't see, is Kathy's here either?
She's in the audience.
Oh, okay, okay.
Could you let her in, please?
I think I'm here now. Can you hear me now?
You are here, Janice.
You are here now.
Okay, great. Okay, good.
Thank you for joining us, Janice, our treasurer. You want to just
Yeah.
give us an overview of our finances?
Well, as you saw, as we talked about at the council meeting recently, the budget is right on schedule as compared with other years at this time. There are a couple areas that are over what we projected, which is nothing unusual, because you don't know exactly what's going to happen when we prepare a budget. As I've always said, this is a guesstimate, and the overall view of the budget is excellent.
Okay, thank you. And you raised an excellent point there. Most people don't fully understand budgets. Sometimes you rob Peter to pay Paul just to balance things out. You may overestimate one area and underestimate another area. So those things come together, and that's how you balance things out throughout the year. Things arise that aren't
correct.
budgeted for.
And as I said, based on the situation when the budget is created, you must remember that the budget is for a year, a fiscal year, and based on the situation as it is, then you make your best guesses based on history and what you know or expect to run into as far as expenses are concerned. Obviously, a year and a half ago, we were very, very frugal. We adjusted that because we did so well, and we go forward. That's why we're having this meeting, I think.
Ms. Walls, do you have anything to add to that?
Kathy, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I agree with everything Janet just said. Basically, it is a conservative budget, and I believe in having a rainy day fund.
Mr. Barthel?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Platt. I think not to necessarily. I think what would be the best path at this point going forward would be, as Mr. Smith did, I think, as Janet alluded to at our last council meeting, if council has specific questions as to any of those line items. I think, obviously, I agree with Janet and with Kathy in terms of the types of budgets we write, which are conservative. And I think pretty much all of council is aware of that. And of course, it is a 12-month budget. And of course, the idea here is halfway through the year, or a little more than halfway through the year, to evaluate where are we. And to agree with them, I think we're in very good shape financially at this point. But again, I think, it's more important, I guess, at this point for council to maybe ask some specific questions of us. And in the hopes that that you agree with our assessment.
Ms. Snyder, 1 second. I kind of agree with you. I don't think this workshop is for that, Mr. Barthel. I think we're going to throw some big planning or things like from the comp plan, things that are probably already in the works, but something to open to discussion now in case we have to adjust the budget, in case staff has to adjust the budget over the next 6 months. Ms. Souders?
My question is just if you could, Mr. Bartel, clarify where we are with the ARPA funding. I know Ms. Carlin said at our regular meeting that we received half of it, which was something on the order of 1.7 or something million. Is that just sitting there now, or do we know what we're permitted to do with it? What are the deadlines for using that money?
No, well, okay, you are correct. We do have half of the 2.91 million that the state has released. They're not releasing the other half for another 12 months, I believe. And as I've been telling council all along, I'm still in communication. In fact, I had a communication. I sent another communication to the law firm that I told you we've been dealing with today, trying to get some more specific answers. Last week, they did make an announcement that there was a quote final ruling in Congress that does allow for broader use of the funds, and I'm trying to get clarification on that. I sent an email actually last week about that and got back to him again today with from my perspective, clarifying some additional or wanting to clarify some additional information on that. So hopefully I will have that soon, but I do not have definitives at this point. And so hopefully I'll get that from those guys, like I said, in a timely manner. As to
Okay.
Okay, so as to
You're
using,
You're
I'm
not
sorry.
hearing any hints that money might be withdrawn if it's not used.
Well, no, I was just about to say, we do have a deadline to complete the projects, and I believe it's 20 December. So I believe it's December of 24 is when I think is when that everything has to be used. So we are on a time clock as far as that goes.
Right.
And I clarify, is that used or committed? So
Used.
for example,
My
if we signed a
understanding is,
contract for a project in October of 24, but it wasn't completed until March of 25, would that still meet the deadline?
my understanding is it has to be completed.
Councilperson Day, being that you work for the county and you're pretty familiar with the ARPA funding for the county to the state, are other municipalities already using this for projects, or are they waiting for rulings too? Or can you speak to that at all?
Just briefly, I mean, the county created committees maybe 5 or 6 months ago to start figuring out where their priorities were to spend their money. So a lot of them committees now are coming back with recommendations to where, to spend the money. I don't think we're really far behind, but obviously it is something that we probably need to start discussing and figure out, how we want to commit our money.
Well, that's what this meeting is for, to start that process. So, Mr. Smith, why don't we start going around the corner? You're at the top, throw your ideas out on the floor, and then we'll go to Miss Councilperson Souders, Council Day, and then Council Leary, okay?
Okay.
Mr.
And
Smith, the floor is yours.
oh, thank you. I wasn't sure how big we were thinking. I didn't think we were going to be thinking of millions. I was thinking we were within the city budget, but in any case, I did go over the comp plan, as you could see, and I shared my thoughts with you where we are and where we haven't made any progress. We've done pretty good, although we haven't really gone over the comp plan goals weekly or monthly. We have made some progress on some of them. And there's one that popped up for me, is there are a couple things dealing with grants, writing grants, development, the downtown development district, and that sort of fits in with something we've been talking about, and that is the need to have some sort of development slash public affairs position, which I'm estimating would cost about $50,000. So that I'd like to bring up. Other things in there, there's some goals relating to community identity. I had the entrance signs designed, and Bill was good enough to put in a request to the trustees. I think we made it over the first hurdle for that $6,650, but we still have to wait till March 1 to see if we got it. I hope we might have a little bit of money set aside in case that doesn't fall through, so we can put the entrance signs that fit the rest of the branding program out. There's also the question of the outdoor maps that are out of date. Those sort of wayside exhibits you put outside, they are static and they're not going to change. And they, in doing the design of the wayfinding program, and when I went back to the contractor, we also redid those maps, and they're ready to be put out throughout the city where they are now, just replacements. And I think Kim is already using that map. I hope she had a chance to get it on the new calendar. And also with community identity, just the issue of flags. I hope we can buy some more city flags. The ones that we got weren't perfect. I hope we can get them a little brighter color. And the flags along Delaware Street, we never did get the 4 country flags up again. And I thought maybe we could alternate US flags and city flags all the way down Delaware Street. So those are some ideas if we have money. I think the development position, what it would help us do was make up lost ground. And I think that's what that recovery money for. It would help us do things that we would have done, but we weren't able to during COVID times. Linda and I had worked on an inventory of businesses, and we were going to go door to door and talk to all the businesses within the development district. And we didn't get to do that. And somebody needs to shepherd the DDD. I'm not sure that there's been much progress on that. We had been working with a guy named Rick Farrell down in Dover. I don't know if our new restaurants are involved in that in any way. And so that's where I am right now with ideas. And if we're going to be talking about millions of dollars, let's build dikes and put gas lines underground. I think I'd have to think of that again to see what are the $1 million projects on the shelf.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman Smith. Councilperson Souter.
Well, I was thinking more along the line of the capital projects, and that we're going to need to set some money aside. Now, the ARPA money being time limited does put a wrinkle into that to some extent, which is why I asked the question about commitment of money versus actual expenditure of money. But we need to set money aside for what we're going to have to do for flood mitigation. If we want to put our utility lines underground, the MSC has made it clear that they can't afford to completely fund this. They're looking for money from the city. That's another thing that would have to be done that would cost a fair amount. And that's not just a matter of aesthetics. It's a matter of protecting the security of our utilities by making them less subject to storm damage and, trees knocking the wires down and so forth. As well as long-term reducing the maintenance costs for MSC and other, whatever we're going to be doing to improve the security for our staff, whether it's retrofitting the existing building or looking at a new building. We're talking about large chunks of money, and I think we need to be setting some aside towards that.
Okay, and there are excellent points, and I guess the reason for this workshop is to kind of start throwing things out on the table so that staff can start looking for money to set aside or budget, or for maybe a tax increase or whatever it may be. So that's the reason we're having this workshop tonight. So thank you. Mr. Day.
Yeah, I guess just a couple of things. And some of the other council members had spoke to a couple of the issues that I'm interested in. The first one being the flood mitigation projects. I know we still have a report out there with recommendations for flood mitigation projects that I think we could do some of that. Bill had said that the final ruling had came out for the ARPA funding, and in that ruling was a whole section on vacant and dilapidated houses where you can use the money, the Rescue Act money, to purchase, renovate, demolish existing vacant houses, create green spaces and stuff like that. So I do think in some of our communities that may be a good idea, is to address some of the vacant houses. Russ brought up about a public affairs or economic development position. I think that's certainly something that the city could use. I'm not so sure that we're going to be able to cover that with Rescue Act money. And then the security measures for the buildings, council chambers and the administrative building obviously are a priority. And I think that's whether we renovate the existing ones, we're relocating them. I'm not committing anything, but I do think that obviously the security measures are something that we need to, figure out what we're doing with. The only other thing, one other thing I'll say is that it would be nice if we could use this money to leverage other money too, whether it's additional grants or this is our match money for like flood mitigation projects. Obviously, we could get a lot more done if we could do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Councilperson Leary.
Being the last one, people have covered a lot of the things that I had on my list. The what is in our flood mitigation projects, what can be done within a certain time frame, leveraging money to get other money to complete projects, cleaning up some of the neighborhoods with the long-term vacant and dilapidated houses, vacant mostly, who've been vacant for years and are in a state of not being habitable. Can we, like you said, bring them down, open up green space? I look at some of our other neighborhoods too. I look over at Buttonwood, can we put sidewalks in along Buttonwood? There's some, but then they kind of disappear and you're walking in the street. And they're not avoiding brick sidewalks to walk in the street. They don't have sidewalks. You have to walk in the street. So, and the recovery coordinator position that deals with it's economic recovery, a lot of things that we've missed out on in the last couple of years. And I think that that should be on, I believe that discussion will be next council meeting on the agenda. But also, we just received the goals and strategies today from former Commission President Baldini from the Planning Commission, and I didn't get a chance to look through it, a lot of his suggestions. So there may be something in addition to this. And I do think we're going to have to prioritize. I mean, we'd all like underground. I don't know if we can get the undergrounding for Second Down and Harmony was estimated, Bill, 5 million. Was that it?
Sorry, what was your question?
The undergrounding of our utilities and stuff for just down Second Harmony and the Strand was $5 million. Is that, it's kind of
Something to that. I think to do the whole project was around 38 or
30, right,
38
but
or
just even
39
that
million.
section.
So I don't know I don't recall the specific for just that one particular block.
Okay, you know, is there, if that would be really nice. Is it one of the most important things? I mean, I'd like it, but is it one of the most important things? Do we have other roads that are really need to be taken care of? And, but other than that,
Yeah.
people have covered a lot of other areas, and I think it's a matter of continued discussion and kind of triage, well, in my word, triage, but prioritizing where we're going and what is needed, and, you know, how much of all can we do with the funds that we're going to have, or with the budget we're going to have. So,
One thing that's what we're here for. I'll just build a little bit on what Mr. Smith said. I did speak to Dave Baldini, and he was saying we're working pretty close with the comp plan. He was, you know, I mean, he sent out his review. I thought I sent it to you. I didn't attach it. I apologize. But it's an interesting document. I would spend some time on it. When we speak flood mitigation, are we talking the entire city coastline? Because, you know, we have 2 industrial parks that back up to the river. Are we going to protect them also? When we talk about economic development, are we going to look to bring in bigger industries that will buy more electricity from us? Because we get a large chunk of change from MSC every year. It's part of our budget. So those are the things that I think we should really start looking at, because, you know, we lose a couple big suppliers of electricity and water. It could cost this town a lot of money. It could cost, they could throw us into raising taxes. So I think we should expand our vision more than the DDD. I was never for the DDD. I voted against the DDD because I thought it was just such a small, limited area. But I think there are some areas that I would like to look into. If we're going to build a dike, does it just go to the Strand, or does it go all the way up through Twin Spans along Cherry Street? Because that's city property also.
where's the flooding?
I'm just putting my wish list out there.
No, I get it, but I
No,
just
I
saying
mean,
that's how we discuss.
they're businesses that contribute quite a bit to the city.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So that's, and you know, that's just kind of my wish. I did see the mayor joined. If he would like to say something, feel free.
Okay, thank you. Am I off mute?
Yes.
You're off mute, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks, everybody. Well, good discussion, and this is not, obviously a one and done. This is a complicated topic, but I think directionally, it'd be great to, you know, and this is part of the process, but, you know, derive maybe a bit of a process, and then come away with larger themes and priorities. And I would suggest that you could come up with then kind of 2 plans, if you will. I don't know if it's worthy to have more than 2, but, you know, Bill's right. I mean, there's the guidance coming out of Washington is painfully slow. And so you can only do what you can do, right? So I'd go down, I'd have one avenue where I'd be ready to go with the understood limitations. I'd have plans in place, contractors lined up, and ready to execute, so that you can do, as Ms. Souter raised, and I think Bill responded, you know, you don't miss the deadline to spend all the money, right? So that's one. And then secondarily, and this probably already exists, but secondarily, then you do what you're doing tonight, and that's come up with alternative plans, that if the definitions are broadened and the acceptable kinds of things for which the monies can be used is expanded, then you can move quickly. If you've got an agreed upon set of priorities and agreed upon set of plans. You look at the comp plan and all the other plans. I would just encourage everybody to divide that up or spend it equitably across the city, and try to include all the neighborhoods, as the comp plan quite sufficiently does. Infrastructure, of course, across the city is durable, and infrastructure is always a good investment. Look how much it costs to do Delaware Street. Avoid, if possible, I think, taking on long-term recurring obligations. If there's going to be a study, or there's going to be a project, that's great. But I think if you bake in long-term recurring obligations, you can ask Janet and Kathy what they think of this. I don't know if they would agree with me. I think they would agree with me that that's a little bit of a hazard. Housing, water, electric, roads, every bit of that all impacts everybody, whether you live in Boothurst and Buttonwood, or you go all the way up to everywhere in between, all the way up to the farmer's market property. So I would just encourage you to kind of think that way, but I'd come away tonight having a pretty good idea of what the process is, creating maybe two different streams, depending upon how fast or how slow Washington moves, and then a couple of different priorities so that you've got a plan of action. You can spend the money and don't miss the opportunity. Thank you.
You know, we've only been talking about how we might want to spend money, but how Joe, Councilperson Day discussed about maybe having how to use some of the funding to leverage other funding. You know, we really haven't ever talked about annexing or annexation. You know, when you look at our city lines, we're very irregular. I know that where Miss Bergmuller lives, that's just one little street that's not annexed into the city. You know, how far south can we go, or could we go? How is there a way
Actually,
to
there are
bring?
3 streets there.
Excuse me?
There are 3 streets there where Kim lives.
Okay, 3 streets. You know, is there a way to annex and round out the city? Is that something we want to do? What is the cost of the city? And Mr. Losco might be able to tell me that, because nothing has ever been annexed in my time. So I don't really know how that goes, but bringing in taxable property, land property, you know, you would, like, as Council President Platt said, you maybe want to grow some other major users of electricity and water. Well, we need a place to put them. And, you know, we're kind of landlocked a little bit as we are right now. There's not a lot of space to put anything else. So.
Mike, you're muted, Mike.
Mike, you're muted.
Mike,
You're still muted.
you're still muted.
Still muted, Mike.
Okay.
That's
there.
better.
I was involved when they annexed Boothurst about 25 years ago. And, you know, a lot of the concerns is when you annex residential properties, it costs you money. It increases your city services, and, you know, your snow plowing, your trash pickup, your police. As far as like electric and water, residential is a very small part of that. You know, I think if somebody's going to annex land and put a factory or a business that was going to employ people, that would make a difference. One thing I've suggested, and I don't know how it would float, but a city income tax. If you live in the city and work in the city, you pay 2%. If you live in the city, or you live outside the city and work in the city, you pay 5%. You know, there's ways to generate income. Wilmington does it, Newark does it. It's just not us. So, I mean, there's ways to do this.
Right.
Go ahead, Mr. Day.
Mike,
Mr. President, could we hear what the city administrator has to say about spending the money? I'm sure he has ideas, and I'd love to hear them.
Oh, okay. Are you speaking about the ARPA money first? Do you want to talk about that? Because, or do you want to just talk in general? Well, I do believe that I've been keeping council pretty well apprised for some time now that, you know, there have been a lot of restrictions on what we can do with that money. And I know Mr. Losco and I have had numerous discussions about that. And we've been very restricted to the point where I wasn't sure if we would be, you know, like it was a very minimal number of projects we could use it for until last week. Now, I think I've also let council know that we've been trying to figure out a way to utilize that money to possibly use it for the municipal complex. And quite frankly, that up until now has been primarily what we've been focusing on. And then, as I said, they had the ruling last week that opened up that whole possibility. And so I'm still trying to evaluate that. I mean, and you guys are throwing out some things that we may be able to, based on whatever the government tells me we can do, I'm going to guess some of these things we will be able to do. But it's still kind of a thread in the needle to a degree. Dan, would you agree with that? I mean, based on the information we've talked about and the information I sent you about the new ruling, the final ruling?
Yes, I would agree with that. And I'll throw in my 2 cents as well. Some of the things that have been thrown out there as capital improvement projects or other expenditures might be funded from state sources that we've relied on in the past, grants and aid and the like, street funding, what have you. This particular batch of money is a one-time deal, and it's a significant sum. I think if it were me and if I were on council, I'd be trying to focus in on items that were not likely to get state or federal funding for otherwise. There was mention of the dikes. I mean, that would be a massive expense that the city itself could never handle, even with every cent of this ARPA money. That would have to be something that's going to be funded at the state and federal level to really get that done. So I would almost take that off my plate and focus in on other things that we're not going to likely get that kind of funding for. Just my 2 cents.
And
But
if
again,
I can jump in there, we did pass a resolution last week to start a study on flood mitigation, the dikes, so forth and so on. So that's in Councilperson Saller's hands right now. She's working on that.
Well,
So-
we didn't pass it yet. The resolution.
Oh,
was-
that's the first reading. I apologize. Thank you. Thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
so
no,
it's in the works. So
I have a draft that Mr. Day and I are working on, and we'll be sending that to Mr. Roscoe for his input in time for the
Okay.
February meeting.
I do apologize about that. You are correct. So Mr. Lasco is correct. There's a project that's probably going to take a lot more money than we'll ever have. So
No, I think I said when we talked about this, I certainly don't expect that we're going to fund the whole thing because we couldn't
Correct.
possibly afford it. But I also don't think it's safe to assume that we won't have to contribute anything.
correct. And that's what I'm saying. But like Mr. Lasco said, the full project couldn't be just on the city.
Right. I sort of facetiously said that, let's build the dikes, but what I meant is let's see what we can do to try to address that problem. That would be one of our biggest needs. And also, let me clarify on that development position. It would be not just for the DDD, but for all development in the city. And it would be a one-shot deal. So we wouldn't be putting money out that we would have to necessarily fund every year. It would be a pilot program or an experiment. And I should have explained that when I had the opportunity.
My dog keeps barking, so I know you guys don't want to hear her whining. She's pretty rough. Mr. Barthel and staff, I think you guys do a pretty good job as far as funding the city and the projects that have to be done. I mean, every year we seem to pave 4 or 5 different streets, maybe more. Things run pretty good as far as that goes. You got some ideas, so when you're putting this year's budget together, because you'll probably start working on it, what, April?
Probably start working on it in April. But to your question, and then just to finish up with Mr. Day, as I started with the ARPA funding, but I also thought this was part of this meeting was to figure out, like you said, ways to go to our senators, because I believe, as the mayor has pointed out on numerous occasions, that the city should have additional funds this year. One of the things I would consider, or would ask that we consider, if that be the case, I mean, we're always looking for road money. And Senator Poore and the others were able to get us, I believe it was $260,000 to our $450,000 projected road projects, which are now projected to be, somewhat higher than that. So if we're in a position to say, okay, hey, now we have not looked at our road projects next year, but we can do that pretty easily and ask for that money. And that will, of course, if we can get that money to do more roads, you can either agree to do more roads, or you can agree to do the roads we want to do, and you'll have more money in your general fund to do some of the other things you're talking about now. And it's not exactly creative financing, it's just being able to get it, like you've said, from other sources. So I absolutely would look at, street money. We may need more money to do the floating pier. I'm still in the discussions with our engineer on that and some of the things that we need to do to actually make that work. In fact, I had a conversation with Mr. Athey last week, and some folks who actually designed that pier, that type of pier, and we're moving forward on that, but I'm not so sure at this point. Now, we're getting to the point where we're going to do a bid, and we'll try to get that bid out before the end of this session, with the legislature. But that too might be something where you go back and say, okay, to complete this, we're going to need X amount more dollars to do that. So that would be something that I would at least put on your radar. I don't have an answer to that yet, but from the conversations I've been having with those gentlemen, my guess is that it's going to come in higher than what we were anticipating. So I would think those are two things right there that, if you're looking at what you're going to be requesting from our legislature, our legislators, I think those are things you might want to consider.
Correct. Okay, anyone else?
I guess the question I've asked before about roads, I don't have any idea of whether we're ahead or we're behind. Are we I don't know, are we losing headway? Are we keeping up with the need? That's what I'm saying.
Well, okay. And the way I would answer that, and that would be through discussions that I've had, not only with Jeff, but with Matt Carter from T Squared Group, who on average will tell you that a municipality should be spending, and again, it depends on the size of the municipality, it depends on the roads, the conditions of the roads, the side roads. But if you're spending $1 million a year on roads, you're, quote, keeping up. But for us, we've been spending on average, I guess for the past few years, well, as the mayor pointed out, someone pointed out, we just spent 2.4 million on Delaware Street. So my thought on that is, if the city's able to fund 400,000 to 500,000 a year, 600,000 a year, we're doing a really good job, because not all roads, again, you have to look at it and go, gee, just because the average or the recommendation in other municipalities is we want to spend $1 million. Well, I think and this is what I think we have to do. We have to look at it in a realistic term and say, okay, what can we realistically afford to keep up? And so my answer to that would be, yeah, I think we are keeping up. And that's why I go back to, if the state has more money for roads, let's not only keep up, but let's maybe stay ahead of the game a little bit. There have been years historically where we've had projects on the table. So, we go out, Jeff goes out and says, okay, these 5 roads have to be done. Okay, and it's going to cost, this one particular project's going to be 500,000. Well, we've got 400,000. Okay, so that $500,000 project wasn't as bad as the other 3. So we make a decision, we're just going to do those other 3 and spend the 400,000 on that, if I'm making sense. And there have also been years where we've planned projects and we weren't able to get them from planning to actual production. And so we've been really lean in certain years where we may have only spent a couple $100,000, but the following year we're spending 500,000 or 600,000. So my recommendation, if you really want to take a look at that, and I think I've been pretty consistent with this, is, look at your 10-year project, look at a 10-year, where were we 10 years ago and what have we spent along the spectrum over those past 10 years, or even go back further, because then we also have had years where we've done, other capital projects that perhaps we didn't do roads, but we did some other things where we've spent significant sums of money. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah,
I guess my answer would be we're doing pretty well.
It does, Bill. And to your point about getting money from the state, one thing I hope we can get money from the state for is the area of 6th and Ferry Cutoff, that area that floods and becomes a skating rink. I know that's somewhere in the program, but if the state has extra money now, and I think they do, I think they have a lot. I think we could press on some of those things.
That's a good one because that's a dangerous center. That's dangerous when the water freezes.
Somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah, that's been a 3-year argument. All right, anything else?
Mayor has his
The
hand.
the mayor has his hand up, Mr. Platt.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you again, Mr. Platt. So just a couple other things to talk about. And you guys just said it right here at the end. The state has never had this much money ever. It is an unbelievable sums of money. And to put it into context, when former Governor Mike Castle finished his last year, city resident Mike Ratchford was his chief of staff. That was the first time the state's budget hit $1 billion. Today, it's a multiple of that times 5. The amount of federal money that's come to the state is just incredible. So you're correct. Mr. Barthel's correct in pointing out that being aggressive in asking for funding from the state is an absolute. We'd be foolish if we didn't, and really hit that hard. The second part is, and I, this is a part that really isn't talked about much by anybody. And I don't mean the folks on this call. I'm talking about around the country, but the savvy and sophisticated ones understand and will do this. When the Congress passed those $1 trillion recovery programs, a substantial percentage, and I hesitate to give you a number, I don't know if it was a quarter or it was a third, ended up not as direct appropriations to states and municipalities. They're sitting back behind in Washington in the form of grant programs. And very, very, very few cities our size will know that and make an effort to apply. I had a long conversation about this with Colin O'Mara. Colin, as you know, is a Delawarean, was Jack Markell's DENREC secretary, and he's now the president and CEO of the National Wildlife Federation. Colin was part of the team. He's very close to the Biden administration and the president himself. And he was part of the team that actually put together all the different spending plans in the Recovery Act. So he's very familiar with where the pots of money are. He's available for conversation. He's a friend. And I would think that it could be one idea. We don't have unlimited staff resources in this city. Perhaps getting some outside help to apply for grants that make sense, that touch the priorities that this group thinks are important, is yet another option. So thank you, Mr. Platt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Why don't you set something up to city administrator, maybe put a meeting together, put them together so they can kind of talk that out.
Sure.
Thank you. Anything else?
Just another project to push for federal money for the state is the Route 9 south of Dobbinsville. That's slated for 2026, and if they have so much money, maybe we should be first in line to get that project moved up.
That's where the connections come in. All right, I don't see any hands raised, so I'd make a motion that we go back into executive session to discuss an employee matter.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. How do we?
Okay, give me just a minute to end the meeting and then,
Do we have to log back in?
no, you should be able to stay on. Hold on one second.
Okay. Kim, I guess everybody's gone.
Yeah, actually, when I press end meeting, it just says end for all, so you will have to log back in.
The same login that we had at the beginning.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm
Okay.
signing off then.
Okay, you can sign off. Thank you, Janet. Thank you for your time tonight. Okay, so just end the meeting. Kim, do I end the meeting once we're done?
I'm going to end the meeting now, and when you sign back on, I'll get off, and then the next time you'll have to end the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.